Good morning, everyone. Again, this is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It's still Thursday, April 24th, 2025 at 9:14 in the morning. And so now we're switching gears and continuing our discussion on S-127, specifically the CHIP part of the bill. So this morning we have Gus Seelig with us. Gus, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Gus Seelig, Executive Director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And I am here to talk about S-127. We did not testify on this in the other body. We have not had a discussion yet with our board about this, but we're pleased to support a new tool that'll help finance the infrastructure with the goal of encouraging development of low and moderate income housing, which is stated in the bill. For those of you who I will not give a long dissertation on VHCB, but we're the funder of about 16,000 homes across our history in lots of rural communities that include Franklin, Richford, Groton, Shaftesbury, Wells River, Algiers. And we know what the difficulty is when there isn't infrastructure available. And I live in East Calais, where we have four villages, one of which has a fire district, but no other public infrastructure. So this is part of a long effort to focus on permit reform, on financing, which the treasurer has helped with state of Vermont subsidies, with your appropriation of funds, with trying to deal with the appeals process to produce more housing along with infrastructure. A fundamental problem that we're all trying to manage is that housing, not just affordable housing, any housing is just too expensive today. I think in 2023, the average newly built home in Vermont, according to BHFA, costs $615,000. That's no longer a starter castle on Spear Street. This year, we in VHFA are helping fund a development in Middlebury, Stonecrop Meadows, with help from the community and from the college. They're building homes in conjunction with Huntington Homes, a manufactured home builder of good reputation. And the market value of a 3-bedroom, 2,000 square foot, 2-bath home is $650,000. A 2-bedroom home of about 1,500 square feet is $550,000, and we're using every possible source to bring the price down so that Vermonters can afford some of those homes, everyday Vermonters. I'll start by saying that I understand you heard from the auditor, who's never been a fan of TIF districts. We have worked successfully with several TIF districts, most broadly the St. Albans TIF district, where I think we're funders of 149 of the 270 homes that have been built in that district or are being built right now. We have a 33-unit elderly project under construction up there at the moment. We've participated also in the South Burlington TIF district. We have worked with communities that also have inclusionary zoning, which South Burlington and Burlington does. I think when we were in here previously, we showed you a picture of a development called Cambrian Rise in Burlington, which is where the old Catholic diocese is. And I think what we're all trying to achieve are mixed income communities. So we're funding now 4 different buildings at Cambrian Rise that'll be, when they're all built out, over 250 units of the 1,000 units that will be most be deeply affordable. Some will be condominiums for first-time buyers. And down the street, SD Ireland is building a building, or has built a building, where condos are selling for well over $1 million, maybe over $2 million, if I'm in that ballpark. So it's the most mixed income community in the state. And I think that's what we want to do. Mr. Chairman, when we spoke yesterday, you said the committee was looking for guardrails. And I think I'd try to reframe that, which is, how can you put policy into this bill that will strengthen the goal that you have in the bill of encouraging development of housing for low and moderate income Vermonters? And I think I'll just tell you a brief story. Many years ago, when I was beginning my work at the Housing and Conservation Board, a Waterbury developer got a permit for 15 units to build 15 single-family homes. And it was at a time in the late 80s when the market was like it is today, really tough for first-time home buyers. And the Waterbury DRB said, how about we give you a density bonus and you can build 18 units instead of 15 as long as the last 3 are affordable. And he worked with one of our partners, and those 3 homes are still there as affordable home ownership opportunities that help people enter the market today, probably at half the cost of what a market rate that same unit would be if it was on the market and not permanently affordable. So we've seen lots of opportunities. What I want to suggest that you might do as a tool to help the bill is to borrow from what we already have under Act 250, which is called Priority Housing Project Designations. And when a developer gets a priority housing project designation, it allows them to skip Act 250. And that provides not a requirement to build affordable housing, but an invitation to a motivated developer to join the development. So we're bringing through, well, a couple of years ago and now we built a 36-unit apartment building with the Champlain Housing Trust within a 180-unit Sunderland Farms neighborhood at Severance Corners in Colchester. This year, we have the opportunity to build a 48-unit development in Hartford as part of a 240-unit master development. These developments could fly on their own without any affordable housing, but they wanted to skip the time and expense that Act 250 would take. So that was a great motivator to make it a mixed income community. We have a housing needs assessment that calls for at least 24,000 homes to get built. Some would argue a much higher number. And what I think we have to remember is we got a lot of people who are nursing assistants, childcare workers, teachers, firefighters, auto mechanics, or our elders who bequeathed the state and did all those occupations that gave us the state that we love today, that need opportunities that are not going to cost $650,000 for a home, or even $550 if you're ready for a 2-bedroom. So I'm going to make 3 recommendations that, again, our board has not had a discussion about, but I think are consistent with the goals of the bill. And one would be that you enhance housing production by simply requiring that 60% of the floor area be developed for housing. I don't think the bill restricts that yet. So I don't think, I think if somebody wants to participate in the TIF program for commercial development, go through that process. Second, ensure that the creation of primary dwelling units and long-term apartments are met by requiring that the homes produced through the program are sold and maintained as primary residences or used as long-term apartments, at least for the life of the loan. And third, I think, and again, this is borrowing from the Priority Housing Project, you can incentivize the creation of mixed income housing by requiring it, by suggesting, as you do under Priority Housing Project, that 20% of the housing be affordable to renters up to 80% of the area median income, or perhaps if it's a home ownership development, up to 120%. And that will require that people find partnerships or bring subsidies in. You may want to alter that, have different targets, but those are what we have in the priority housing projects under current law, and we've seen it work well. So those are the things. I think that this is an important piece of legislation to move. I think it's an important priority for the governor. I think it goes with all the work you've done on permit reform, the work we still need to do on appeals of housing projects. And I think really important as we enter a time where we're going to, I think, lose the federal partnership that we've had that brings resources that helps make housing more affordable. So those are the thoughts I can give you today. I wanted to do it quickly because you're in the midst of a discussion, but those are the ideas that are popping around for Polly and I as we thought about how we could be helpful on this matter.
Just on the priority housing, no, that's already in statute. Is that in the Act 250 statutes?
That's in Act 250. It's going to go away as we transition in the coming years. So the question for us is what will incent a big developer to bring affordable housing into their deals? I should mention we're giving you a memo that will summarize what I just said. One of the things that works against this is the more expensive the home, the larger the increment they're going to pay for the infrastructure. So it kind of pushes against building more modest homes because it'll produce a smaller tax base upon which you'd be able to pay off the infrastructure. And, you know, I think for me, I guess I would just say, when you think about all the occupations in Vermont, there's only so many people who can buy $750,000 homes. And so we need to find some way to help focus it. Maybe it's going to be just that you're going to reserve capacity in these developments and you won't fully build out until subsidies are available to help bring the price down. But I think we just need to find some ways to say, because we are in essence spending public money or giving public money to support these developments. How do we help those Vermonters become homeowners, be in a good rental situation, a stable rental situation, who don't make a ton of money and can't afford what the market is currently producing?
Thanks for your remarks, Gus. A couple of thoughts. A lot of the projects that you referred to seem to be, great projects, a lot of units, pretty high. And I'm trying to think of how that would play out in some of the real rural towns. And I'm kind of skeptical that we would get a 55 unit or 54 unit development. And that's segueing over into your thoughts around, well, let's make sure that the developer reserves, a certain amount for affordable housing. I think you said 20% and, some sort of measure against that. And I can see that working maybe for a larger project where the developer can, I think, sounds like basically make it work with affordable housing because they have the non-affordable, I guess, side of it, subsidizing or, helping build the affordable housing. I'm thinking about some of these maybe smaller kind of projects where you're talking about 6 to 8 units, right? And, they might be double wides, they might be whatever, maybe prefab kind of thing. And I'm wondering whether that kind of requirement might be difficult for a developer at that scale. So, I'm trying to, I really understand and agree with your notion of, geez, we need some affordable housing. And it's just that, how to do that in a way that works and actually is an incentive for, developers to build homes.
I don't have an answer for you other than to say that for any developer, scale matters. And it is, I think it goes to the goals that you're trying to achieve here and who will use the program. So we have worked on small projects in small communities, and sometimes it takes a really long time. So I don't know that in Groton, Vermont, we did a scattered site project over 4 different locations years ago. So I can see that, when we were both very young, I joined the East Montpelier Fire Department. The fire chief made his living, or part of his living, by building houses up and down the county road back when it was much easier to finance even the construction of homes. And they were all modest, ranches and that kind of thing. I'm not sure this program is going to necessarily help a developer at that scale, but maybe it would. And maybe you want to carve out some, minimum size for the affordable requirement. And below that, maybe you don't, but that may be a way that you can approach that issue. But if somebody is going to do a 20-unit development, maybe that, I don't know where the magic line is. I don't know. And it's also an issue you can evaluate a year from now as you hear from VEPSI about who's participating, what kind of inquiries they got that they turned down. So we're never going to answer all the problems with one piece of legislation. So I think you're putting your finger on something that definitely needs to be thought more about.
Okay, thank you.
Gus, can I kind of add
Please.
some detail to what we'd be talking about in terms of the affordability levels? Because you mentioned what if we're putting in double wides.
Before you, for the record.
For the record, Polly Major, I'm the policy director for Vermont Housing Conservation Board. Homes that would be affordable to a household at 120% AMI could be between 250,000 300,000.
Yes.
So we are looking at that small rural home that would be affordable to more than half the population, because 100% AMI would be half the population, so maybe more, half less. This is a little bit more than that. So that's really what we're talking about when we're saying, can this public infrastructure incentive include middle income homes?
Yeah, and that, yes, I hear that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether it's feasible with a smaller kind of project to be able to subsidize, the cost of some of the homes in order to bring down the cost of others.
Yeah. Thank you. Question? Emma?
I'm kind of curious about I apologize if this is offensive, but about the notion that like just building as many houses as we can build, no matter what the income requirements, is gonna be the solution for us.
Well, I agree that, we could build 10,000 homes that cost $750,000. And most of those occupations I just listed aren't going to be served by them, right? The nursing assistants, auto mechanics aren't going to be able to buy those homes. So we do have a supply problem. And everything is connected to everything else. I remember being down the hall, and when we first started talking about how high the housing costs had gone, and the representative from Newberry Wells River said, well, you can't find people to build houses because they're all working on a multi-million-dollar house down the road from me. So to the extent we have a labor problem, and somebody last year, my staff as a partner who's in the construction business, and he bid on a home that was going to be $40-50 million in Stowe. So those sorts of things are driving and hurting the ability to build affordable housing. But we're also not going to do this by not building a range of housing. And, so we need to do both. And that's why I'm arguing for suggesting that you add some language in the bill that focuses on the need to build some of these houses at a cost point that people can afford.
Questions for Gus? Yes, thank you for coming in. We appreciate the suggestions.
Well, I hope they're helpful. And as I said, I think all of us feel like moving this bill is very important in some form or another.
Can I ask one other question? I think your second suggestion was that there be some sort of provision that the residence be sold and maintained as primary residence. How would that work? So sold I can get, I understand. How would that work in terms of it continuing to be the primary?
Well, I know it's always been a requirement for VHFA when they provide a mortgage to somebody that they use it as a primary residence. I think that's a question if VEPSI is going to administer this, of how will they monitor that? How will they enforce that? I'm not sure it'll be easy. But if what we do is, I mean, how this building works. And if we are going to build lots of second homes, with this, it's not gonna fly, so we gotta do something to not have that be the result.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
I get the sold, but I was just curious about how the maintained part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's,
I do have to point out, and I don't want a bunch of second homes in the state of Vermont. I did, come here, live here, pay taxes through your income tax too. But there is a benefit to that as well, specifically for like the municipalities that are collecting municipal taxes. And even though my comment would be, we should tax people that don't live in our state a little bit more on their income, their house assessments, or not assessments, but their property taxes. That's just how I feel on that. But I do have to point out that no matter what's built, it does benefit the community through property taxes.
right, I understand that. All I'm trying to say to you is I think there's much less political support if we are diverting revenue to build second homes. That's what I'm,
I would agree.
that was my point.
I would completely agree. I'm not interested in building second homes for,
Yeah. And I'm not saying we don't, it is a real benefit to the state, the revenues that come out of Stowe, Vermont, in terms of, right, I get that. And on the other hand, I've got a friend who lives in Stowe and was describing to me how their infrastructure is limited. And so if we're going to help Stowe build housing, we want it to be for the people who make a living working in Stowe.
It's a very good, I appreciate the way that you frame that. I really do. Because it's very valid.
Other questions for Gus?
I wish you good luck on this. If we can be helpful, if you want us to go from concept to trying to come up with language, we're available to help, but you also have Ledge Council to help you with that. So if we can be more helpful, how to find us. Thank you very much.
Your suggestions, thank you. So committee, we have time for more discussion. John will be with us at 10:30 to go over updated language, and we can continue to make changes to this bill. I don't know if folks want to keep talking right now. Anybody has anything that they haven't mentioned yet?
I guess something that just came to mind is sort of notion that if we just build a bunch of houses, like no matter what the price point is, it also assumes the sale of those houses. And if a lot of those, depending on what happens with the market, if the market turns and a lot of them are upper end, we felt this back in 2008, then you have a bunch of homes that are sitting on the market not selling, or end up being used for a totally different purpose if they end up getting sold, rented out and that sort of thing. So I think having some controls and some incentive to build the middle is really important, because we have to build houses that are also going to sell.
Would say that the market will fluctuate for that and then drive down prices of houses.
That can be a really destructive process, which we've felt before.
It could be. It definitely could be. Could be. I do really, just being part of the creation of our TIF in Berry City, I don't think that there's going to be a significant, I don't see, it's a great program. I don't see it being utilized to like a really concerning extent to cause that glut in houses.
I guess I'm thinking, I'm not just thinking about this single product.
Oh,
I'm thinking
with
about this
everything that
whole
we're doing.
entire housing
Yeah.
landscape that's just being.
I think I mean, I work in this industry and I mean, market forces are market forces. We can pass all the laws on the planet and market forces are still going to work. There's nothing we can do about it. I listen to this and how do you enforce it? How do you say, okay, well, you have to make sure you keep this affordable? Because as soon as somebody buys that property, buys that house or condo, how can we stop them from 3 months later flipping it, selling it for double the price?
They have deed restrictions.
Yeah, we do have some laws. We do have permanently affordable housing. We do have some levers for that.
And I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying
Do
if
we
we're
wanna
going to.
put them into this
Exactly,
program or not?
exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
and to what extent do we put them in if we do?
And then there's there's that, but let's take rentals. Okay. I can tell you that there are a lot of people out there that signed a contract with VHFA not to rent their house out and they're renting their house out. So now how are we going to enforce this? I mean, are we going to knock on their door once a month and make sure they're living there? I mean, so I don't know what tools do we have in our toolbox to solve that.
Everybody fills out a homestead declaration, right? So we do have that, something that is
It's binding and
It's
it's
real.
making thing a
right. So I think we have more tools than we think we do. The question is, do we have the capacity to do the enforcement? And what is the enforcement? And that's really the question. So, yeah, go ahead.
So the other side of that coin, I think, Tony, is not to denigrate any issues around affordability or whatever, but the more limitations you put on a program, the less motivation. It's crass, but the less motivation you're going to have for a developer to do it, and might be uncomfortable with that. But I think that's reality also
much
in
so.
terms of market forces. I'd rather see a program that does encourage low and moderate income housing for primary residents, so that you motivate a developer to do that, as opposed to going and building really, really expensive houses where they have a real good profit margin. I would like to, this should be an incentive for developers sponsors to do this. And we run the risk of, I don't know where the line is between going too much in terms of limitations and that, but there's probably a line somewhere where if you put too many limitations, you're going to be disincentivizing people from using it.
Laffer curve.
Hmm?
I think it's called the Laffer curve.
Oh, no, don't get into that.
I guess all I'm saying is, we need to make this affordable, but I really feel like we should do it through incentives, not mandates. I guess that's, philosophically, that's what I'm trying to say. If we're going to make this moderate and affordable, we're going to have a lot more success if we incentivize them instead of forcing them to say, you must build, instead saying, well, if you do this, you'll get this extra.
Which is where we go back to the original tip has meet 3 or 5, right? So if you have, there is criteria that you have to meet, and what is that criteria and how does that work? And if you have affordable housing, maybe you only have to meet 2, right? Like there are ways to incentivize. There are things that we can do creatively. How much time do we have to work on this, and how much effort can we do to get this right?
Well, I do like the concept of what you were mentioning about the priority housing in Act 250. And that's bills, that's language is already
Yeah,
written in there. If we can somehow tie this bill to that, for that bonus of the affordable housing.
It expires in 2027.
Is there a way we
So-
can add that is there a way that we can add that language into this bill that would extend it?
Technically, we can do whatever we want. Realistically, I would say it's a long shot.
Yeah, at least that'd get us to 2027.
Yeah, programs that can get their stuff together.
But it's
I would
20.
think the same forces that are giving us headwinds on this stuff, might give us headwinds on that too.
2027 in the development realm is like tomorrow.
It isn't much.
Especially when you're, I just fall back on the process of how long this is going to take. It's a minimum of a year, no matter what you do. As it stands, it's going to be a minimum of a year before you see anything happen. Just because, yeah. That's my opinion.
Switching subjects a little bit, I can't remember exactly what I talked about yesterday because I was doing a lot of talking. So the program started out as the Spark, whatever. I love these sort of acronyms.
It didn't, there were two programs that came in, Hit and Spark.
Yes,
Now we
Hit and
have-
Spark.
Yeah.
And if I remember, I can't remember the original Hit, whether it included actual housing construction. I know Spark did. Was that?
It did. And if you go back
Yeah.
and look at the original version.
Yeah, I have a Spark, but I don't have the original Hit. And included using the same type of financing for actual housing construction. And I understand it's probably too late to introduce that into this bill as something part of the program, but I'd like to keep that notion alive by having someone report back to us at some point in the future on their recommendations.
I don't think it's too late to introduce that.
Oh, well, then I'll introduce. So that would be the issue of, instead of just limiting the financing mechanism to infrastructure, to actually include housing as well. Don't know what people think about that. Infrastructure, I haven't got
Oh,
it.
you mean to fund housing?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, it's too late for that. Sorry.
that's what I,
I thought you were talking about an amount of housing that was required to be built. You're talking about actually funding.
yes, because the original program, at least Spark, I can't remember the Hit. You had the program.
It never hit, sorry, I fully misunderstood. Hit never included funding concepts. It did
But-
include an amount of housing that needed to be built.
But Spark, I think, did. I'm just thinking about some way to keep that notion alive, and so that we could revisit it, at some point in the future and have somebody, especially with the experience of how this is working for infrastructure, to think about making some recommendations for whether or not we should do something to, expand the program. If it's working well, expand the program.
Next year, the following year, yeah.
Or, I don't, sometime in the
Looking back
future,
at
but
the report.
I think you need to assign someone, some agency, the task of doing that. What that agency would be, Betsy obviously comes to mind, but maybe someone else too.
Did you ever hand up?
I did. I wanted to go back to the priority housing thing. Are there particular politics in allowing a project to kind of like skip? Oh, well, I guess what I'm thinking is, so the priority housing thing with the CHIP is already geographically designated to areas of high growth or goals of high growth. So adding something like a priority project, would that be so bad? Because it's not necessarily allowing you to skip over like Act 250 regulation at all, because there is no Act 250 regulation there. It just sort of allows the project to be seen sooner.
Right, so yeah, one of the things, would you like to chime in on this one?
Or
Do you want to join us at the table?
And I can speak a little bit more to the recommendation Gus made around using the priority housing project framework within CHIP. What we're looking at is priority housing projects have been a really successful carrot for getting affordable units into broader developments. And the reason why he's citing large developments is those are the ones that are passing through Act 250, so needed that carrot. What he's suggesting here is, hey, that carrot worked really well in Act 250. Can we use the parameters, the guidelines within CHIP? So can we say a developer is eligible to receive CHIP to get this public financing for the infrastructure if they have 20% of the units affordable to up to 120% AMI. So it's not tying it back to bypassing Act 250 because the priority housing project provision is going away because we've made all housing able to bypass Act 250 in those growth areas. What we're suggesting is this was a framework. These were affordability triggers that worked well for getting affordable housing integrated into mixed income communities in the past. Can we use the same triggers in this legislation as well?
So the idea would be that the sponsor, developer, municipal, they'd be eligible for CHIP if they added. Okay.
Yes, and what we're looking at is that, and Gus mentioned this, the tax increment is going to be highest for higher value homes. So this program's without a guardrail is going to be most valuable for the higher value homes that the market can already build. And so it needs some sort of incentive to for developers to use it for those lower margin homes that aren't going to have the same broader increment. So it's just, this is one way that could be that incentive to ensure this is being used, not for higher value communities only, but for the mixed income communities that we need to ensure that we're housing our workforce.
I think that if you look at it in a certain number of homes will be built on any particular property, then your theory applies. But I think that we're looking at developments that can be up to a very large number on a small amount of land. And in those situations, it's much easier to create more affordable housing. So I think that, you know, there are multiple ways to look at how that will.
And so is there then a first trigger that says if you're building a community of over 10 homes, then you need to include some affordable homes to use this infrastructure financing. But if you're using this for, I think we've heard that example of the apartment over the general store. If it's a lower number of homes, it just automatically qualifies. That could be a way to balance these. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're gonna have a bunch of people that are gonna build exactly 10 units, which is how Act 250 has been abused for the last half a century.
Isn't there somewhere a 50 unit trigger?
Up to 50
Up to
units in
50
areas
units.
1B.
Yeah, I think the threshold should be higher. So, but I don't know.
We can't change that.
No, not that particular one, but for
Oh,
this,
more than-
for this, more than 10. Because I think, yeah, getting down to 10, I think starts potentially getting into like tough situations for smaller communities. But if we're able to raise the threshold, maybe that's an option.
So the PHP incentive in Act 250, to spare me from looking through Act 250 again, you know the citation for that any chance?
I really wish my computer hadn't shut down.
I can find it.
And I can send it to you.
Can I get a little more sort of a restate? That threshold for that 10 unit thing, what happens if it's below 10? Someone's building 6 in that instance?
Then they would not need to have a low income component or moderate, whatever, affordable housing component.
Is it- you-
Is that in this bill? Hey.
No,
No,
I'm just talking.
Okay. I was like,
They're just
oh.
ideas, ideas.
Sorry.
I think what is in this bill is that purpose to create low, moderate primary dwellings.
Right.
And, but there's market forces that tie into that tax increment force that disincentivize those. So what is the incentive that could be added to ensure this is being used for mixed income communities?
Yeah, and that's what, it's the incentive. It's not us saying you must, but how do we incent that to happen?
I mean, you made, I think it was, you were making comments about the intent language. You know, to strengthen that. And I think that, again, I just don't know. Get back to my original comment that I've said like 50 times. So about how I don't think it's going to be, one, I don't think it's going to be abused. And, you know, I think with the intent being housing, I think it will be used as such. But I have
Well,
faith in
I mean, I'm not worried about housing, but it's, how do we incent mixed use, right? So that we don't want a bunch of $1 million plus, then we don't want a bunch of lower rates. So how do we, I mean, we've got to incent that mix. And, you know, we've done that right now by eliminating Act 250. If there's a mix in there, how do we do the same? What do we create to make that same incentive?
I really believe that our municipalities are going to push for that low, moderate, mixed income.
I guess
you're
if I was,
stuck.
I mean, I
Right?
I sat on a select board for 29 years.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at, I guess you can look at if someone comes in with a proposal that they're gonna build, you know, 20 units and they're all gonna be $1 million a piece, I'm looking at my grand list and saying, that's great. That's so,
That's my concern, that's how the smaller towns are gonna.
I would think that that might be a voting, a select board reelection problem. Like if you were to do that in your town, wouldn't, I mean, I think you might pay a price for the polls.
Well, not necessarily. What if the town wants it?
Yeah, that's the
Well,
thing,
the
it
town
depends.
wants it.
I mean, that also.
If the town wants it, the town wants it. Right? Why shouldn't they have what they want? I am feeling like we're doing some value judging on municipalities that, and it seems like, I don't know if I agree with all of that.
I don't know if we're trying to, I know for myself, I'll speak for myself, but like, I'm not trying to make any value judgments on municipalities. You're doing what you have to do and then what the numbers are asking you to do. And you have a community to take care of course. But I view part of our job as trying to at least fight a little bit against and buffer against some of those market forces that are keeping a really large swath of our population out of affordable housing. And like this affordable housing thing has really crept up the income ladder at this point. So it's hitting a lot of people.
So part of why I was, a couple of days ago, in this conversation, one of the things I was sort of trying to get a feel for was what we might see, what patterns we might see over 10 years, because it won't, I don't think it'll just be what any response to any legislation will have the market forces behind it. And how it responds in the first 5 years might be different from what's needed or what will happen in the next 5 years. And I think more than one individual who sat here has sort of made the assertion that I think makes sense, that we're probably going to start with the stuff that's worth the most. But that seems like like, I don't know how we could possibly avoid that since we have such a scarcity of new construction happening now. Like that seems as if we have to pass through that phase, we can get to the next elements where a broader mix is coming through. And I that could be wrong, but I think we have to prepare ourselves for a response that takes place over time, because I feel like we're trying to make up for a lot of lost time in lost construction over the last like 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, I definitely see that, and I think that that is going to be a very real concern, and the thing that is gonna happen. I think the goal here is to, like, I do worry that like enthusiasm, resources and all that stuff will start drying up before it gets to communities like mine. So the hope is to try to create a system that mixes it in first. So maybe that has a little bit more slip to it. It doesn't completely dry up by the time it gets to our most rural communities.
Well, you see, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the market forces are market forces. I mean, if you build more housing, you're eventually housing prices are going to moderate. The problem is that could take a couple decades.
Yeah.
And we simply don't have that kind of time.
Jump in hurt.
Yeah.
Just having
I
discussion.
could do that, but you know, I'd end up jumping in all the time.
We'll tell you when it's someone else's
There we
turn.
go. There we go. I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago in Burlington. I may be getting some of the specifics wrong, but Burlington was going through a significant change in their planning and zoning regulations. And there was, I thought, a pretty remarkable op-ed in Vermont Digger around that situation, because there was a lot of pushback from folks who didn't want to see those changes, which were going to remove some barriers for housing in Burlington. And what did he say? He said, we can't have too many people who say, I want housing, but I want, you know, a larger setback, you know, regulations on parking or whatever. They were very Vermont, Burlington specific limitations. And I think it carries over, to my mind, it carries over to this issue. We got to be careful about folks who's about the but, right? You know, I want a housing, I want affordable housing, but, and every but that we add is going to make it less. Well, I don't know. I don't know that it's a direct tie-in, but I thought the commentary was a good one. And they ended up, I think, making the changes, and by all reports, it's worked pretty well. And it just talks about, we just need to be careful about how many limitations we put on it. And, you know, where that is, I guess, the art of legislating.
That's what you do is parse the butts.
I mean, so we've heard from, is it VLCT seems to be in favor of the bill as is. HCCD was, anyone else among the testimony that we've taken? And I can't even remember.
There's only one opposition as far as I know.
So what are we doing?
Some edits from, was it Park and White?
Oh, right, Whitenberg.
Well, those are edits. I thought we were talking about opposition.
I'm just thinking like, who's been feeling good about it? I'm just trying to like bring myself back to like,
I
yeah.
think it's been pretty positive. I mean, there's only one that I can think of was opposing.
And so now what we're,
So why don't we, we're having John in at 10:30 for the draft. So let's look at the draft. Let's talk about the draft. And look at it. If there's changes, additions, deletions we want to make, then have another draft where we can circulate it and get comment from people that are around the room right now. I think that'll help us a whole lot. To try to get this and finish up, right?
It might not hurt, you know, because, you know, some of the other committees have expressed some concerns, maybe letting them take a look at it too.
Well, I mean, whatever we put out, we're gonna put out. They'll have a chance to look at it, and if they want to make changes, they can, but they, you know, we have their thoughts in mind, but we have our own thoughts too, so I think we do as much as we can to compromise our position with their position, and put out the product that we feel is the best product going forward, so. So I think, you know, let's take a break till 10:30. John's in at 10:30. Because we can sit here for another half hour and just keep talking about what is. You can. And we'll come